And welcome to the public meeting of the Halton District School Board for Wednesday, September 18th, 2019. At this moment, I'd like to remind everyone that this meeting is video, voice recorded, and live streamed from the hdsb.ca website. I would also like to ask that you turn your devices to silent mode. It may look like Trustee Amos is not here, but she's actually joined us by phone this evening. And Executive Officer McFadden was unable to attend this evening, so General Manager Taha is here in her stead. This evening, student trustee, our new student trustee, Burns will be honoring the land. Go right ahead.
Halton, as we know it today, is rich in history and modern traditions of many First Nations and the Métis. From the Anishinaabe to the Ottawandaron, the Haudenosaunee, and the Métis, these lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. As we gather today on these treaty lands, we have the responsibility to honor and respect the four directions: land, waters, plants, animals, ancestors that walked before us, and all the wonderful elements of creation that exist. We would like to acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for sharing the traditional territory with us.
Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of possible conflict of interest this evening? Seeing none. Next, we are up to the agenda. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda? Thank you, Trustee Shuttleworth, seconded by Trustee Garrett. Thank you. Is there any discussion at all on the agenda? Seeing none, so we'll vote. All those in favor. Trustee Amos, what did you say? Can you try again? Margot. Okay, that carries. Thank you very much. Passes unanimously. Okay, as per our agenda, we have no Inspire Awards this evening, no delegations or presentations. Now we're up to the consent agenda items. So I'm going to put the motion on the floor. Be it resolved that the Halton District School Board approve the consent agenda action items and receive the information and items for September 18, 2019. Moved by Trustee Oliver, seconded by Trustee Rocha. Is there any discussion? I see Trustee Gray, would you like to have something pulled from the agenda?
If I may, it's just a small housekeeping that I have cleared through Manager Gortmaker, and it's on we're adding the word home in front of the word school on the last paragraph in the optional attendance document. It's just to provide clarity as to who is making the decision. Currently, it just reads the school principal, and we're adding the word home. And I think it's just a housekeeping, so I don't want to hold it up, but that's what I'd like to have. Yeah, and I think there were some other people that Trustee Shuttleworth wanted to pull that one as well. And I'd also like to pull the asbestos management admin procedure as well. So why don't we... Trustee Shuttleworth, did you want to go on the speakers list and you can speak to the... Go right ahead.
So in the optional attendance document, what I wanted to look at was in Section 1, application for optional attendance. They talk about the exceptions, about siblings of students admitted to specialized programs, requests for regional programs, and special educational placements that do not fall within the parameters of optional attendance. I think we need some clarity around the discussion about siblings. And then my question also with that is it says note the following exceptions, but then it classifies special educational placements do not fall within the parameters of optional attendance. So is that an exception or a rule?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Trustee Shuttleworth, and Superintendent Zonneveld may certainly want to comment as well. Special education placements are not part of the optional attendance process because those placements appear at specific sites, and those placements are determined through student services. So they're not part of, like, they're not part of a catchment area. Those kids don't, they have a homeschool catchment, but their placement is where it is, where it's located. So they're not part of optional attendance.
Okay, so then, again, coming back to the siblings. Siblings of students admitted to specialized programs in other schools must apply for optional attendance if desired. The application must be completed and processed appropriately. Well, I'm just concerned that there's not necessarily a definitive instruction in that. I just know that we have had some correspondence with the board surrounding siblings.
Through you, Madam Chair, to Trustee Shuttleworth. So the interpretation of that, I believe, and my colleagues will correct me if I haven't got this correct, is if one child is admitted to a specialized placement through an IPRC, for example, or if that happens to be an ESL center, that doesn't mean that the rest of the family are automatically admitted. But they would be, we would look at that. Does that make sense? Like the siblings of that child.
Through you, Chair Drabens, it's in part in there because there's a perception that siblings are automatically granted optional attendance. The intent is to try to keep siblings together, but there are various reasons why that may not be the case, such as class size, school size, etc. So it's trying to recognize that with siblings, it's not quite the same as it used to be. I know this is specific around exceptionalities, but we have had that in the past where a student was placed in a placement and the family argued that they wanted their sibling to go to the same school, but yet we would not necessarily do that. So I'm looking at Superintendent Zonneveld, correct? Yeah.
Thank you.
It is. With siblings, our intent is to still try to keep families together, and keep siblings together. The difficulty is when it's an automatic, that becomes a problem, or can be. It's not becomes a problem. It could be. I'll give you an example in primary schools, or at primary class sizes. One, you might have a sibling coming into a primary class and there's a cap on that class size and you allow sibling to come in. Well, that increase in that class now is a $100,000 hit because we've pierced the cap and we have to add a class. So we may say no to a sibling in those circumstances.
Okay, so there seems to be no more questions about the optional attendance. Now the asbestos administrative procedure. I was just wondering if this was fully vetted through the unions.
Right. Through you, Chair Drabens, I'll make a few comments and then Superintendent Puccetti will say something. And it's unfortunate Executive Officer McFadden's not here because she was integral in doing this, but I'm sure General Manager Taha, if he needs to make a comment. Yes, we had a third party come in and help us with our new asbestos management. We shared that with all our union presidents, and we also had a meeting with our union presidents around it, a meeting in which I attended, Superintendent Puccetti, Superintendent McFadden, and General Manager Taha. We attended, and then that helped form the writing of this admin procedure, which we also shared with our union presidents for comments prior to it being here. So there's been a lot of collaboration on this, recognizing the hazards of asbestos, and it's important that our partners in the board, our unions, because clearly they have a stake in the safety of their members as we have a stake in our employees' health. So hence there was a lot of consultation and collaboration around this, And I think it's a good example of where got off to a bit of a rocky start, as things sometimes do, but I think we ended in a good place and everybody felt relatively good about what we've come up with. And I believe the union presidents felt supported in the end. There were some challenges at the beginning, and I wouldn't, but I think in the end we landed in a good spot. So looking at Superintendent Puccetti or Superintendent Taha, do you have any comment?
Thank you, Director Miller. And just to say that the message that we received, not only from the union, but also from school administrators, helped guide how we revise the AP. So we in a way, decontented the AP and created a separate document called an asbestos management plan, which is really very well organized. We're just about ready to launch it publicly, and that's the document we also shared with the unions. We're now just sharing it with the principal groups, and it's very clearly organized by roles and responsibilities, so people will be able to find information very clearly. Some of the other things that we tightened up were in terms of our procurement and work order process. So now whenever a work order is issued to a contractor, and it's done so electronically, there is a banner that indicates that there is asbestos in that school, and there is a link provided at the top of the work order to the asbestos survey. We are also working with the communications department and to create a new web page. On that web page, we will upload all the asbestos surveys for the 68 schools that were built prior to 1985, which are typically, that's the time frame where asbestos was stopped being used. But the asbestos surveys will be available online at the HDSB website. So not only staff, contractors, but parents as well could look at that asbestos survey. Some of the other things we did is to tighten up the procedure for contractors who come in to do work in the building in terms of they have to sign a contractor logbook. And these were comments that we, again, found when we consulted with both the unions and school administrators to find a way to tighten up the procedure. Very clearly in our AMP, asbestos management plan, it says that no work that impacts asbestos will occur in a space that is occupied by people. The work may have to happen after hours if it's an emergency repair, but then it has to follow the procedure that is the requirements that are actually in the regulation of how that work should be done. So I think we're going to be making all this information clearer and more accessible to people, as well as sort of providing all those requirements that we had before, but it was a very dense AP, and I think breaking it out this way will bring some real clarity to how we proceed.
Okay, thank you. Okay, yes, I'm going to call the question now. So going back to my voting area. Okay, this is approval of the public consent agenda. All those in favor? Thank you, Trustee Amos. And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, now we're up to 4.0, ratification action items. Approval of business transacted in private session. Vice Chair Harrison, do we have any business from private session that requires approval?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have one. And here it is. Be it resolved that the Halton District School Board accept the tender from Everstrong Construction Limited in the amount as per tender RFT 19-168 for the construction of the new Milton Southwest No. 1 Secondary School in Milton, Ontario. Be it resolved that the Halton District School Board approve a budget of $43,712,066 for the construction of the Milton Southwest No. 1 Secondary School. This project is to be financed as follows. Capital priorities funding of $32,555,603 as allocated by the ministry in November 2016. Educational development charges of $8,137,345, excluding land purchase costs and EDC eligible costs relating to expropriation. Building capacity unencumbered capital savings of $191,481 to cover budget shortfall. Proceeds of disposition funding in the amount of $2,827,637 to cover the budget shortfall, and I so move.
Seconded by Trustee Garretts. Thank you. Is there any discussion at all? Okay, seeing none. Yeah, seeing none. Okay. Oh, no. Trustee Garretts. Thank you.
Just a big shout out to everyone on this one. Congratulations.
Okay, short and sweet. I'm just looking for the topic. Manager Gortmaker?
Oh,
I,
just double check. I thought I missed it.
okay. Okay, all those in favor. Thank you, Trustee Amos. And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Director Miller?
Thank you, Chair Drevents. I have a few comments about this Milton Secondary School. I think this is going to be wonderful for the kids in Milton. It's a much-needed school that we've needed for some time, and it's been a bit of an arduous process, but we've got it now, and we're getting to work, and our facilities department and the construction company and contractors will get this school built, and we'll have a nice brand-new modern school for secondary school students in Milton. But I do want to make some thank yous because I believe strongly in public confidence in education, confidence in public education. I think this is an example. So there's a lot of people that, and I'm going to mention their names. We don't normally do this, but former superintendent of facilities Cullen, former superintendent of business Lucy Veerman, and our current superintendent of business Roxana Nagoy, and superintendent of facilities Maya Puccetti deserve a lot of credit for getting this going. It's been like I say, an arduous process, so they've done a yeoman's work to get this done. And of course, superintendents Hunt Gibbons, Newton, and Associate Director Bogue have been involved in trying to make this a state-of-the-art design for a new century of learning and education. And finally, I have three people that I really want to thank who are not here this evening, who are in the back rooms of the staff, and often they do not get the accolades that they should get. Sonia Clayton, Mike Wildfong, and Dom Renzella all work as staff in this board, and they have spent hours and hours and hours. I can't tell you how many hours working with the Ministry of Education, architects, contractors, politicians, and so on to get this done. So I want to thank them. Finally, I want to thank all the trustees, in particular Trustee Garretts, Trustee Daniele, and the Chair, Drevents, and Vice Chair Al Harrison of the board for their undying support in getting this done and the appropriate, shall we call it, lobbying and advocacy for this school that has helped to finally come to fruition. So we'll all have a good day when it opens up. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Next, we are up to 4.2 for action for this evening. We have one action item for this evening. I'd like to draw your attention to the recommendation for transit passes for secondary school students. And I was wondering if I may have a mover. Trustee Shuttleworth, and a seconder. Trustee Reynolds. Excellent. So I'm going to put the recommendation on the floor and then we can discuss it. Okay. Be it resolved that the Halton District School Board in principle support the concept of free transit for Burlington students through Burlington Transit and direct staff to investigate with partners the details of a memorandum of understanding and to report back regarding this opportunity by December 2019. So before we talk here or have a discussion, I just want to give the public a little information. In the summertime, we were invited, along with the Catholic Board and the French boards, to a meeting at City Hall. Our staff, the local trustees, as well as staff from those organizations, to speak with the mayor and her staff about the possibility of extending free passes to secondary students in Burlington. There was a lot of interest in the room. The program that's being suggested is similar to a very successful program that works out of Kingston, Ontario. And during last week's committee of the whole meeting, which is unfortunately not voice recorded or live streamed, the mayor did come and herself and answer questions with regards to the program. And this motion that's come to the table was the motion that was recommended from that meeting. So moving forward with this motion just puts us in a position where we can, our staff can talk to their staff, a work group can be formed. Though we do, for this to move forward, we would also need to have the Catholic Board on board and HSTS. So hoping, considering, well, I mean, the result of this motion tonight, we'll say lots, but if it goes the way of the motion at committee, it's a very hopeful thought for, or a hopeful move forward for the students of Burlington. So the speakers list is growing. I'm going to start with that. So Trustee Gray.
Thank you, through the chair. I note that the motion refers to free transit for Burlington students, but later in the background, it refers to developing a program for high school students to ride Burlington Transit for free. I wonder if the word high school should be in the motion?
You're right. It should be in the motion.
Okay. And so corollary to that is, why are we not including, say, grade 7 up on this?
That was not on offer from Burlington Transit, from the city at this point. They were just speaking about high school students. Can we have a unanimous that we change that to include high school students? Secondary students. Free transit for Burlington secondary students through Burlington Transit. Secondary school students, secondary school students. I'm seeing nodding. We're all happy with that? Okay. Okay, so on to the next speaker, Trustee Shuttleworth.
Hi, thank you, through the chair. I was just wanting to voice my very active support for this motion. I know that there are numerous students that participate in after-school programming reliant on school buses that will be happy to have that new option of getting home, as well as the students within Areas where they've been rezoned to new schools and are still within the walk-to zone but have a difficult time getting to there. I know this was something that lots of families have spoken to me about, so I really appreciate the motion coming forward.
Excellent. And there are no other speakers at this time, so we will move to, I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you, Trustee Amos. So that carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we're up to 5.0, communications to the board. First off is item 5.1, student trustee reports. Trustee Lau and Burns, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so excited to give the second student trustee report of the year. So first I'll just begin with a quick update for our student senate, which is happening next week on Tuesday from 6 to 9 p.m. here. I would like to invite any trustees that want to drop in and say hi to the student senators. So that will be happening from 6 to 9 p.m. We plan to introduce some of our long-term goals that we may be interested in pursuing, such as the drug policy working groups and environmental advocacy. Also, we intend to introduce our Halton Youth Leadership Symposium to the senators so we can begin planning as soon as possible. Also, we'd like to make sure that senators have a good grasp on what the Senate is about and its impact on the board. So we'll do a brief presentation on that. In terms of numbers, Trustee Burns and I have made a spreadsheet with the names of the confirmed senators, and we have about 25 so far, but schools still have until the end of the week to send in their names of their senators. I've also received numerous messages from senators so far, including those who are excited to be serving for a second year or those who want to pursue an executive position for this year. We're hoping to get more senators over the next couple of days, especially from schools that haven't participated in the past and from the north.
Trustee Lau and I have been busy as we have been exploring our relationship with the Halton Environmental Network this year, and we'd just like to quickly thank Superintendent Pennyfather for setting up a meeting last week. The Executive Director of the Halton Environmental Network, Lisa Kohler, has agreed to do a workshop for our Student Senate in January, which will be brought up at a future board meeting. This year, we also plan to inform senators about youth opportunities such as a Generation Green Unconference that senators may be able to attend. On the topic of receiving student senators for the upcoming year, Trustee Lau and I have been contacted by many of those who have been appointed by their schools, with many of them noting that their commute to the J.W. Singleton Center is very long. This is particularly true for student senators from the Milton, Georgetown, Acton, and Halton Hills regions. As a result of this problem, Trustee Lau and I are planning on investigating the possibility of either online meetings or some kind of a second meeting area for student senators from northern regions that can connect to the J.W. Singleton Center.
Thank you. We're open to any questions.
Okay, Trustee Oliver.
Thank you very much for the update. I'm looking forward to a new year for you with the Senate. And I'm wondering, how is the information about school senator recruitment being shared, and whether the Senate website has been updated?
So yeah, I updated the website 2 weeks before we were sworn in with the updated dates and our trustee bios, as well as some resources. We're planning on making a Google Classroom where student senators can also see the videos and other opportunities that may be present in the board. In terms of recruitment, we leave that up to the schools because some schools like to appoint their senators by election, and then others like interviews. So we really leave that up to the discretion of the administrators and the principals of the schools.
Okay, Trustee Reynolds.
Thank you, and thank you for your reports. I'm just, for the student trustees, I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind letting us help you with that information sharing. If you could let us know what schools are not sending senators, it might be an opportunity to sort of share amongst our parents groups or even at the school level that try to encourage some students out.
So schools still have 2 more days. For my school particularly, we have 3 student senators and 2 have been appointed so far, but I only know that through like my groups and student council, because schools tend to want to get as many applications as possible for this position. So I think that the last possible time that a student can express interest is Thursday. So we'll wait. Yeah, so we'll wait on that to release the spreadsheet that we made.
Trustee Daniele.
Thank you. I'm incredibly excited to attend your first meeting next week, and also very excited to hear that you're trying to make plans to engage those students from the north and find them. So it just on that note, through you, Madam Chair, to Superintendent Truffin. Superintendent Truffin, we've had discussions, and we have had in the past remote sites of Student Senate where they were gathered at Milton District High School as well as here and had joint meetings. Can you speak to the technology that might be used for that, and is it possible?
Yeah, through the chair to Trustee Daniele and the student trustees. I know that some previous student trustees have utilized their smartphones for a hangout, and you can certainly do that. I guess a couple cautions. If you do decide to do that, you need to be cautious. If this is the main site, you have to be really cautious of, who's speaking, using a mic. It's not an easy task, and you just need to be conscious of who's speaking to the camera, because if you're broadcasting to a Milton site or an Acton site or Georgetown, they would just need to be aware of who's speaking here. And it's really just, as the trustees probably know, it's just done through a simple Hangout or FaceTime.
You said through their devices. What happens to a student who does not have a device?
It would be coordinated through the student trustees. So they would coordinate a student senator in Milton or Georgetown or Acton and say, so we're connecting with you. So there's some coordination that the student trustees would have to do on. They wouldn't all be on a device. You'd utilize the school and a projector, something like that, yeah. Can I ask, I'm sure that you're well aware of what you could potentially do with the cameras and FaceTime.
So as of right now, Trustee Lau and I have had a brief discussion already on the possibility of having a secondary meeting center at the Milton Adult Learning Center, which is a possibility as of right now that we have not fully fleshed out or investigated. It is a brief discussion that we have had that could possibly facilitate meetings for student senators from the northern regions to increase the current amount of representation we get from those regions.
And I can certainly help with give you a hand on what you need for that.
And one further follow-up, I just, Superintendent from Milton, Newton, I believe, had something to say.
Thank you. In talking, and through the chair, in talking with a number of students in Milton, they would love to participate in Student Senate. They'd like it to be located at the Milton Learning Center for all students to come. So we have done that model with our principal learning teams. We alternate every other month. So 1 month it's in here in Burlington, the next month it's in Milton Learning Center. So I think that would be inclusive and equitable.
Okay, Vice Chair Harrison.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, I was really excited about all of your report, and in particular the piece about exploring environmental advocacy. And I also sit on the environmental management team, and we were talking about that exact topic and student voice and how much of the broader action in the world right now around climate change is student initiated. So I guess I'm wondering, as a board, what your advice will be to trustees on the action that we can take to participate in a good way in what's happening around us. So when Student Senate has that information, it would be, I look forward to hearing it.
So for those of you who are unaware, last year I was the senior representative on the environmental management team. I represent student voice for high school students specifically who wish to have their concerns heard about environmental activism. This past year, to touch on that point made about student-driven activism, there have been many students who have been very, very diligent in their work to engage the entirety of Halton, when possible, in their environmental action. Right now, Trustee Lau and I have worked with Ms. Kohler and Ms. Burwell as well to speak about the possibilities that we have this year in Senate and a possible timeline for different actions that we can take at this moment. For now, to all trustees and anybody who is listening, I would say the best thing to do is to support student voice and engagement in environmental activism whenever possible, and whenever a student expresses interest in learning about those topics, to support them to the best of your ability in those endeavors.
Sure, and just to follow up to your point about last year and student engagement on environmental management team, the initiative to reduce and or eliminate laminators in schools came through student voice, and that is something that has been taken up by the system and has in a good and successful way. So again, I look forward to next steps, learning what our next steps should be.
Trustee Shuttleworth.
Thank you. Through the chair to both Trustee Lau and Trustee Burns, I just wanted to draw all the trustees' attention to the fabulous work that these two have done on the Student Senate page on the web page. If you can take a look, it's really very good, and I just want to commend you both on it.
Okay, that's great. We are now up to action items for October the 2nd. So we have one action item, number 521, the 2018-2019 LTAP Boundary Reviews, Report 19109. General Manager Ranzella, welcome. The floor
Thank
is
you.
yours.
Report before you this evening is an annual report that we bring forward to trustees in terms of giving direction and approval to move forward with boundary reviews for this upcoming year. And the boundary reviews are typically identified as part of the long-term accommodation process. And this year is similar. The first two boundary reviews that were in the report refer to the Milton Southwest number 1 high school, as trustees have just approved the tender for that project. We initially had this on the agenda for earlier this year to start, but because of the delays in ministry approvals, we deferred or held in abeyance this boundary review. So the recommendation this evening is to move forward and to recommence the boundary review for that particular area. And the boundary review would also include Dr. Frank Hayden, mainly as a result of some issues with the Kilbride School, which has some students going to Milton High Schools, as well as Dr. Frank Hayden. So they have been included as part of this year's boundary review. The second one is the Samuel Curtis Estates boundary review. Again, we started the process earlier this year. However, it was again put into an abeyance because there were some questions as to the future of the Lakeshore Woods school site and where that was going. And as trustees are aware, the board declared that school site surplus, and now we can move forward with that particular boundary review. The third boundary review that we are looking at undertaking this year is in the Palermo community, Ward 4 community, where we have, as identified in the report, there's a couple of developments or subdivisions or that are located within the Palermo catchment area. However, when we were undertaking a boundary review a number of years ago in Ward 4, due to accommodation pressures at Palermo, these two areas were redirected to Heritage Glen Public School. We're looking at, as Palermo's enrollments are starting to decline, we are looking at potentially redirecting them back to the school in their community, which is Palermo. The fourth one is the Acton Schools Boundary Review. This one wasn't really identified in the long-term accommodation plan, but there has been extensive discussion at the staff level with respect to looking at reorganizing or reconfiguring the grade structures in Acton at the three schools: Acton District High School, Mackenzie Smith Bennett Public School, and Robert Little Public School. And the fifth boundary review would be more or less as part of the Viola Desmond boundary review, there was a small area that was kind of left to be determined during the process, and there was no as a recommendation coming out of that boundary review. That area is now coming online for development next year, and it would be prudent and practical to identify what school students that would be coming out of that development would be going to before they start moving in. As a corollary to all this, one of the items that was discussed at senior staff level was the Aldershot French Immersion program and enrollments. If some of the trustees may recall, as part of the Burlington PAR, there was a commitment to kind of monitor enrollments in the French Immersion program at the school as well as Burlington Central. We just wanted to point out that this year, with the introduction of the iStamp program at Aldershot, we saw a fairly substantive decline in the French Immersion enrollment in grade 9 at Aldershot. At this point in time, we're not recommending a boundary review, but we just wanted to bring it forward to trustees so that they are aware and that we will continue to monitor the situation. I'll be glad to answer any other questions. Thank you.
Okay, I have a speakers list. Trustee Oliver.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I'm very pleased to see the recommendation for Oakville ERA 114 and 115 as a trustee for that area prior to the municipal boundary changes. That is something that I had asked for and advocated for since I was first elected in 2014. That boundary was always a source of contention, and I know that the families were not happy when it was first established. At that point, there was no space. There is now, so that's great that those students can be moved into their neighborhood schools. And that will enable them to form friendships with the kids that live in that area, to use active transportation, be able to bike or walk or whatever, to school on their own. And those neighborhood connections will carry over into the summer months where they'll be able to connect with their peers and freely use the school playgrounds as their own community hub. So I'm pleased to see that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before we go to the next speaker, Superintendent Padra-Barrick, I understand you have some clarification for us with regards to the number 4 option.
Yeah, through the chair to trustees, just a bit more detail on the Halton Hills option, or it's looking at a reconfiguration of the grade structures at the school. So the thought being, and what we'd seek feedback on, is making both elementary schools JK to 6 in Acton and Acton High is 7 to 12. The reason behind that is we think it would get at some increased student retention, so build up Acton High population, offer more course diversity there, also offer more diversity in programming and resources for kids in the grade 7-8 level at Acton High, and also provide fewer transitions for the kids. Pretty much all of the Robert Little families are in 3 schools. This would align every child to 2 schools in Acton. It also would create room in MSB for more community partnerships. And as many of you know, Acton's one of our more vulnerable communities, so anything we can put in there, there's early interest for things like putting an early on child and family center into MSB and relocating. So it would provide some really enhanced opportunities. So it really would be putting to the community the kind of status quo option or looking at this and getting some feedback between the two options.
So what is the implementation for?
Yeah, that would be for September 2021 is what we were thinking. So we go out this year. It would give us time to look at implementation the following year for September 2021.
Okay, so I'll go on to the speakers list here. Trustee Daniele.
Thank you very much. A lot of really exciting things happening here. Well, first of all, an overall question. 5 boundary reviews, Mr. Rizzella, with 3 in February and 2 in June, I believe. What's the impact of that going to be on your staff? And then my second question is, with 2 coming in Milton, I know they're February and I know they're June, would they be expected to run concurrently because the high school one will be significantly more in depth? And because again, I'm worried about the impact they may have on an already very busy superintendent for those schools.
Thank you, through the chair, to Trustee Daniele. My staff is up to it, and they're up to the challenge. And if you look at the boundary reviews, some are going to be more or less a very limited boundary review process. Like there's 2 avenues we can go: a full-blown boundary review process, which we would envision for the high school review in Milton. The other one, with respect to the to be determined area, will be a very minor one. It'll be done through the boundary review steering committee. I don't envision having any real public process there. It's more of a because there's nobody in that community at this point in time. And similar with some of the other ones as well, that we would say it's more of a tell process rather than a full-fledged discussion. So, but those will also be discussed through the school boundary review committee as well.
Thank you for that. That's what I was hoping to hear. Your staff is absolutely amazing, and I was a little concerned about possibly burning them out. So thank you for that.
Okay, Director Miller, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, through your chair, Bench. Thank you, Trustee Daniele, for that expression around the staff time. We have had pretty extensive conversations around these and what's our capacity to do them. And we think we're kind of like we're at the limit in terms of boundary reviews. And your acknowledgement of the busyness of Superintendent Newton, she's well aware of this. There's no doubt that the Milton secondary school boundary will be complex. It's involving a whole number of schools in Milton, secondary and elementary, and I would say that the chair of the co-chair of the Boundary Review Committee, I'm going to tell you, will be Associate Director Bogue to take some of the pressure off. and then, of course, a trustee from outside the area will also co-chair, but that hasn't been determined yet. But thank you for that. And as Dom says, as General Manager Renzella says, some of these, you don't want to jinx it. Some of these should be fairly quick and easy, but like I say, you don't want to jinx it. We've said that in the past, and all of a sudden, we're into it. So,
okay. Vice Chair Al Harrison.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, I think that the Southwest Oakville community will be excited and interested in the Samuel Curtis related boundary review process. And I look forward to getting that communication started with that community. Secondly, I have a question related specifically to, I would say, number 3 and number 4, and just how they're reflected in the report. And the report seems to suggest that there are predetermined outcomes, i.e. that there's things noted in here that should be the outcome, but if I think about the admin procedure, the boundary review steering committees, I'm just confirming that they're not tied by any presumed outcome. So if, for example, that group sat down and there was another shiny and exciting option that could be put forward, including the status quo, that they would be enabled to also look at those options.
Director Miller?
Through you, Chair Durant, to Vice Chair Al Harrison, you're exactly right. They were worded in such a way to provide the rationale to the community as to why we're doing them. But if some, the work of the Boundary Review Committee, in particular the one in Acton, and the one in Oakville as well, that if something does come up that says from the committee, then that will, of course, be explored. As you know, that the final recommendations will be brought to this board for approval. So we have to make sure that we've dotted all the I's and crossed the T's for you to make a good decision on these things. Yeah, it's a valid point you make. It does look like it's predetermined. It isn't predetermined, but we thought it was important to provide a rationale because particularly in both these cases, but especially for the Acton one, because some in the Acton community would wonder, why is Mackenzie Smith Bennett on there? And there have, I'm just going to remind trustees, last year, Trustee Gray chaired Rebents, and Superintendent Podreberic and I spoke at the Halton Hills Town Council. And one of the questions they asked me was, will Robert Little be closed, or is it on a closure list? There's some sensitivity around the smaller schools in Acton. And my answer was no, it's not on the list, and there's no intention of being on the list. So we thought it was important for this case for people of Halton Hills to read it, to understand that this is not about, even though it's an accommodation review, it's not about a school closure or anything like that. It's to try to improve the thing. So I hope that addresses your.
Okay, so seeing no one else on the speakers list, I have a comment that may turn into a motion. So across the board, we have seen many school boundaries that I would call Frankensteinish. They were cobbled out of necessity over the years and then left year after year, long after the crisis of the time had run its course. And I know one example in my own area is the French immersion boundary for Charles R. Baudouin that ended up splitting the Florence Mears cohort, so that part of the cohort ended up being directed to Clarksdale Public School, and the other part continued to be directed to CRB. The enrollment pressures at CRB have eased considerably, and in fact, within 9 years, the school will be under capacity, according to the LTAP. And for this example, the 2018-2019 LTAP actually recommended a boundary review to unify the boundary, but it isn't on the list of recommended reviews. And I'm sure staff have their reasons for keeping it off the list, and I'm sure the number of reviews that are on this report is a large portion of that. But I would like to ask that the staff actually study and write a report on these all oddball types of boundaries that we have across the board, and write a report and a roadmap as to when these boundaries could be corrected, citing reducing costs, minimal community upheaval, and other pertinent criteria. It would be great to be proactive instead of being reactive where possible. So I don't know if, go right ahead, Director Miller.
Through you, Chair Drabants, Chair Drabants and all trustees, we can certainly go back and take a look at a report. We do have odd, I don't mean odd, but uncharacteristic, jagged boundaries around the board. I think it would be appropriate for us to do so. I think it would be, the question would be our timelines and when we get back, and that could help, that could complement the work of the LTAP in terms of our prioritizing on which ones we do, because as you've pointed out, the Baudouin Clarksdale one was on the list, but our capacity to do all these, as Trustee Daniele's already identified, is difficult. So we could, do a form of report, get back to this board and saying, here's what we're looking at, and that could help inform where we go on future boundary review recommendations to the board around tidying up, I guess, basically is the best way to describe it, some of the anomalous boundaries. I think it's probably best if it comes in the form of a motion and with some timelines, and I would ask that you give us sufficient timelines. I don't know what's sufficient. I'd be looking at General Manager Renzella for some guidance on what a good timeline for something like this would be, because it would be his department doing it. So,
General Manager Renzella.
Can I make a suggestion? I think this would dovetail perfectly into our long-term accommodation plan. So we would incorporate that information as part of that, and then moving forward, it would, translate into any recommendations moving forward. But I think that would be appropriate at that time, because you'll see the numbers and everything else. So, and typically we'll have most of those boundary reviews done by the time the LTAP comes back to the board. And I think early April will be the first go, and with public consultation moving forward. Just a thought, suggestion.
Okay, so that's to me, that's fine. It's just a question of forming it into a motion as per the request of the director. Did you want to speak before we do this, Amy? Okay. Trustee Collard.
Thank you. We also have some situations that would not be covered by a boundary review, but we have situations where students in special education programs have been moved to accommodate students who live in a specific area. And so they are no longer a complete cohort because they've been divided or split along grade lines, creating the necessity for extra transitions for them to remain in the special education program in which they're in. And I would like to have a similar type of reporting on those situations and what could be done to bring those children all within one room, or not one room, but under one roof for the duration of their elementary years. 10 years is a long time to be in elementary school, and the fewer moves that students with special education needs have, the better. I think everyone can understand that concept without a lot of explanation. I know of more than one situation where students are being required to make more than one transition through their elementary school years because of programs having been split up.
Superintendent Zonnefeld.
Through the chair to Trustee Collard, I know we've had a few discussions about this, and so I know you're aware that we have a self-contained classes administrative procedure that talks about the decision-making process around where we locate self-contained classes and why. Certainly the space available in schools is part of that process. So for a report like that to come forward, I think we'd have to just be mindful of that admin procedure and clear that the location of self-contained classes isn't part of a boundary review scope or process. So that would, this would really sit outside of that kind of a report.
Yes, I do recognize that. I said that on the outset, that this does not fall within the boundary review process, and because of that, it never really comes to the attention of trustees unless it happens to a school in their ward. And it would be good to know where all of these situations exist throughout the board.
Through you, Chair Drabens, I agree with to Trustee Collard. I agree with Trustee Collard, and we can certainly put a report together on that, because I believe you're correct. I don't think all trustees are aware of these. So, yep. I'm wondering if that probably should be I don't know whether that'd be a motion or not, because we've done it in no harm in making it a motion, I guess. What do you think? Yeah. You want to put a motion on the floor in a minute?
Sure. I hadn't thought of putting a motion on the floor, so I don't have one in mind.
We could just do it because it's slightly different. It is different than a boundary review process because we have the admin procedures that follow it. I just don't want us to lose sight of it. I guess that's the.
Why don't we incorporate it on the board report schedule?
Okay, we'll do that in a board report schedule. How's that?
Thank you very much. I appreciate that suggestion.
Okay, we're still hashing out a potential motion here. Vice Chair Al Harrison is a much better wordsmith than I am. So anybody who's online, just to let you know that we are forming a motion to work with the conversation that we've had so far with respect to adjusting the legacy boundaries as part, a report to dovetail with the LTAP, actually, or be part of the LTAP. Okay, we're going to try this. Be it resolved that the Halton District School Board direct the Director of Education to undertake a review of legacy boundary issues in conjunction with the 2019-2020 LTAP process and prepare a report that gives consideration to correcting boundaries while reducing costs, minimizing community upheaval, and other pertinent criteria. Okay, we're going to. Okay, no, I'm not moving on that yet. We shall try this again. Be it resolved that the Halton District School Board direct the Director of Education to undertake a review of legacy boundary issues in conjunction with the 2019-2020 LTAP process and prepare a report that gives consideration to addressing boundaries while reducing costs, minimizing community upheaval, and other pertinent criteria. I guess moved by, I guess that would be, am I moving that? Seconded by Trustee Collard. Okay, great. So is there any further discussion on this? Okay, so I guess we're as part of the LTAP, so when the LTAP comes out. Okay. So all those in favor? Trustee Amos? And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. And thank you very much. Okay. Okay, next we're up to notices of motion. Are there any further notices of motion? Seeing none. Oh, nope. I do have one. Vice Chair Harrison.
Thank you very much. And I believe we could consider this tonight if my colleagues are so willing. This motion is with respect to PRO grants, Parents Reaching Out grants. And my understanding and recollection is that this is generally the time frame when school councils would be writing their applications so that they could deliver some great parent engagement in their local communities. The ministry funds that program, and I understand that the ministry has at one point indicated that they would be continuing funding. First, should I say, at one point indicated discontinuance of the funding and then indicated continuing the funding. At this point in time, the website, the PRO specific website says nothing, and I'm getting a number of inquiries from school councils that apply every year and deliver great things. So I'm proposing just that we reach out by letter to the minister and see what their intent is around that. So the motion is as follows. It's kind of long. Maybe I'll just get to the exact motion. I had a few whereases, but I think I explained that already. So be it resolved that the chair write a letter to the Minister of Education expressing the valuable contribution that school councils and PRO grants play in engaging the community in support of student achievement and well-being, encouraging the continuation of the PRO grant program, and requesting that information be made available as soon as possible so that school councils can submit meaningful and timely proposals for consideration.
Do people want to deal with this evening? We don't actually have to waive the rules. We were given some notice, actually, in the Q&A document that we have. May I have a seconder? You're moving it, Vice Chair Harrison, seconded by Trustee Daniele. Is there any further discussion on this? Okay, seeing none. We just need it added to. That was Vice Chair. And we're just going to go right to the pro grant one. So we're going to set that topic. All those in favor? Thank you, Trustee Amos. And that carries unanimously. A letter will be written. Okay. Now we're up to the director's report.
Thank you, Chair Drabantz, and you'll be pleased to know that it is nowhere near as long as the last chair's director's report. Just two items, and the first, Superintendent Hunt-Gibbons has distributed a document to all trustees, as you had asked us to come back to give you some data on class sizes at the secondary level. I'm not sure if the student trustees got that, no? So if we can send that to the student trustees as well. And then Superintendent Hunt-Gibbons, if you have any opening remarks, and then we'll turn it over to trustees for a few questions on what's going on with our class sizes.
Sorry, I was just trying to send that to the trustees, sir. Okay, through the chair to all of our trustees, and thank you for doing that, Trustee Shuttleworth. Apologies for the student trustees. I accidentally left you off that circulation. What it is I provided the trustees with an update on the class sizes at 36 and larger here within the board. For the benefit of those in the audience this evening, we had shared at the last board meeting on September 4th that there were 99 classes currently sitting at 36 students or greater, and that was down from over 100 the week prior. And I had indicated that we were on a downward trajectory, that class movement was a normal part of school startup, students changed their mind, class balancing, etc. and also because we were over projection in some schools that Human Resources had released 7 full-time equivalents to schools with enrollment pressures greater than anticipated. So when we looked at these numbers more recently, the number has come down a little bit again. So the number is at 82. However, the 82 includes Gary Allen, and Gary Allen is a regional. So even though we use the name Gary Allen, we're referring to multiple sites. So when we control for that and take out the students there, then the number of courses with 36 or greater students in our high schools is actually 66. And then for the benefit of trustees, just looking at the distribution of those and where they're occurring, of those 66 courses, 62 of them are occurring between numbers of students between 36 and 39 in classes, with 9 of them in grade 9, 17 of them in grade 10, 13 of them in grade 11, 13 of them in grade 12, and 10 of them as multi-grade joined courses known as J codes in our system. And courses sitting above at 40 or greater students, there are currently 4. 2 of them are theory of knowledge, which are tracking codes and not actual classes. 1 is a large music class, and 1 is a jointly coded college and university computer science course with 43 students in Oakville. And I had been asked by one of the trustees if I could provide a comparison to last year at this time. And I cannot, because wait lists and movements are fluid. And so we don't have a snapshot in time, and I don't have a data source from which I can pull that, because it was constantly in ebbs and flows. So that is the up-to-date report on those numbers.
Director Miller?
Thank you, Chair Drabens. I have some additional information to that. In 2018-19, the final enrollment of secondary school students in the board was 18,761. And this year, so far, there's always a little bit of flux because we are only in the 3rd week of September. We have 19,289 students at secondary level. So our change in enrollment from a count in March 2019 based on registration forms and so on to September to now is we have increased by about 528 students at the secondary level. And then the section allocation, I won't go into all the sections, but just sum it up like this. We are up 528 students, but we are down 426 sections, and a section is a class. So we have distributed 426 fewer sections to our secondary schools, but we have more students. So it doesn't take a mathematician to figure out that there's got to be larger classes, as Superintendent Hunt-Tibbins has said. So.
Trustee Amos, we're trying to figure out a way to get you to be able to hear you appropriately. Okay, you can try now.
I received an email today from a parent who's concerned that a student is saying that her 4 courses this semester have a minimum of 40 students, and 3 of them are the STEM courses, and that there's not as much support provided this year because of less teacher time. So I'm glad to hear the numbers are decreasing, but I'm not sure how to respond to the parent when they're concerned, especially for a grade 12 student. Can you provide some assistance?
Yes, through the chair to Trustee Amos, I would encourage the student and the parent to approach the administration, because we're pulling our numbers directly from the system. Sometimes students will hope that a wait list will open and they will sit in a class which they don't have an official seat at some point, but certainly the numbers and the data we're pulling from do not indicate that that class the way you're reporting it is actually occurring, and I would look into that if you wanted to forward me the email, or if the parent wasn't comfortable, you could direct them to their school administrator.
Okay, are there any further questions? Okay, so I just have a question. So just a note that, so we're looking at 66 classes this year. And so we're expecting perhaps that are 36 plus, we're expecting that as the average goes up, that the number of those classes will also rise in the next 3 years.
Mathematics would indicate that is so, yes.
Okay, and the other comment that I had, I was just putting that on. The other question I had is, we keep hearing reports in the media about grade 12 students at other boards not being able to get classes. Some of them are getting like 1 class per term, and they're finding it difficult to be able to graduate this year with the schedules they have been given at this point. Do we have students like that in our system right now that we're aware of?
Through the chair to the chair. Every year we have individual students who are having a hard time meeting their particular path, but there are other factors that are part of this. So yes, there are larger class sizes this year, but there is also the ongoing issue that if you requested the course when it was offered back in course selection last winter, then you're guaranteed that section, you get that course unless it's conflicted out, such as in a small school where there's only 1 section of it and it's running against something else that you have asked for in order to meet your personal path. Not necessarily a requirement for graduation, but from how you're looking at it, for instance, grade 12 core level French and a chemistry class, and you're in a school where they only have a single section of 1, and then students have to look elsewhere to find one of those courses. That's not as common in our larger schools where there's multiple sections of these courses that run. What can happen then to students is that if they've changed their mind around an optional course, because in grade 12 only English is the required course, and so if they've decided that they wanted 3 sciences and they only chose 2, then they end up on a wait list. And of course, because classes are larger, wait lists are larger, trying to get those courses. And the same could be said for other alternatives available to students, such as night school, as well as e-learning, etc. And so we don't have it reported to, we have not canceled any core requirement courses for graduation, but I would agree that there are probably students out there who are having a hard time satisfying their own personal path and wants at this point.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, your next item?
Yep. The second item is, if trustees will recall, last year this board undertook a very successful human rights symposium on Indigenous issues, and we have another human rights symposium coming up, as we mentioned earlier, and this year the focus will be on the rights of the child, the Convention of the Rights of the Child. So we've been able to secure 2 pretty top speakers, and I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Etoff to say who they are.
Thank you. Yes, we're very excited about our Human Rights Symposium, which is, again, going to be taking place on December the 5th, right here in Burlington at the Holiday Inn. And the steering committee has been working diligently in putting all aspects of the conference together, including a great list of workshop presenters. But our 2 keynotes that we'd like to share out, and we'll be sharing out through our promotional and communication materials, is Michel Ashikwanin. He's from the Congo originally, now lives in the Toronto area, and speaks about his experience as a child soldier growing up in the Congo. And of course, Stephen Lewis, who is a humanitarian and former UN envoy for the United Nations in terms of HIV and AIDS in Africa. So we have a great lineup, and we're extremely excited.
Okay, are there any questions at all for Superintendent Etoff or Director Miller? Okay, communications from the chair. Just to let you know that Vice Chair Al Harrison and I met with MPP Crawford of Oakville on Friday to speak about education issues. It was a good meeting. Okay, and now we're up to committee reports. Are there any committee reports? Trustee Oliver?
Thank you. Through the chair, I'll provide an update on SEAC. The chair of this term of SEAC, Danielle Adair, who represented Voice Association, had to step down due to moving out of Halton region, and therefore a new chair was elected last night, and it's Ms. Lucille Morris, who's a member at large. Last night, the group received a presentation on the third phase of the special education review that was delivered by the presentation was delivered by the consultant that was hired for the purpose, Alana Gray. And this generated a lot of great questions, comments, and discussions. And finally, the Learning Disabilities Association of Halton and Hamilton has extended an invitation to first corporate breakfast that's being held on October 1st in Hamilton. And anybody interested can find details on the LDAHA.ca website. And if I've missed anything, I'll ask my fellow trustees to chime in. Thank you.
Vice Chair Al Harrison.
Thank you very much. Through you, Madam Chair, the environmental management team met yesterday, and I'll just give you a high level of the few things we spoke about at length. Firstly, how are we communicating all of the great environmental initiatives taking place at the board? And we talked about possibility of a report. We talked about the possibility of requesting a video so we could let not only ourselves but our whole community know the good things that are taking place and the things that we are looking towards doing around energy efficiency, waste management, green meetings, for example, the banning of single-use plastic water bottles, and the list goes on. So there is quite a list, and it also goes into our school designs and buildings and all sorts of things. So I'm looking forward to something coming forward in the next little while on that. We spent some time talking about the possibility of creating a story initiative around active transportation. There's lots of great examples in our communities of neat things taking place, like locally developed rolling school buses. So we talked about maybe having a story contest, among other things. And it was great on EMT. I just wanted to let you know that community partners also sit at that table. Halton Environmental Network is really present and helping to kind of leverage other opportunities outside of the board for our students as well. So it was a really good meeting, and we're planning to meet next in November. I should have also said we did talk about climate emergencies and the climate strike that is being planned for next week. Thanks.
Okay, Trustee Gray.
Thank you. And through the chair, the audit committee met yesterday for its first time this year, and on the agenda, among other things, were the audit committee terms of reference, the administrative procedure of the audit committee, regional internal audit status reports, and the annual report to the board ministry. So much more of this will come forward at the next board meeting. from the Audit Committee. I would like to make mention at this time that elections of the chair and the vice chair took place yesterday. Congratulations to Amy Collard, who will be the vice chair of the Audit Committee, excuse me, not Amy Collard. I'm looking right at Leah Reynolds.
No.
Congratulations to Leah Reynolds, who is going to be the new vice chair of the Audit Committee. Thank you very much, Leah, for that. I don't know how I can look at you and think another name. Sorry, my apologies. My apologies. And I'm going to continue in the position of chair for the Audit Committee for this upcoming year. So we look forward to all of the work that we have ahead. There's lots to be done, including the appointment of an external Audit Committee member, and we will be looking into having interviews for that position possibly in the month of November. So more to follow at the next board meeting as we report out on the activities of the Audit Committee. Thank you.
Okay, great. There are no more speakers on the list for committee reports. We're up to trustee questions and comments. Vice Chair Al Harrison.
Thanks very much. Through you, Madam Chair. Just a question related to PPM 128. That's the Provincial Code of Conduct and School Board Codes of Conduct. Last week, the Minister of Education announced changes regarding this PPM. It's being changed to reflect the restrictions on cell phones and other personal mobile devices in classrooms. And school boards should review the revised PPM to ensure that their policies align with the revisions and requirements on or before November 4th, 2019. This thing I was reading said school boards should pass a resolution to amend their policy and post the updated policy on their website. This is from OPSPA, and I just wonder, do we need to make those revisions, and is there anything we need to do today? What can we expect?
Through Chair Drebens to Vice Chair Al Harrison, I'll refer to Superintendent Podrick, who's been.
Thank you. Through the Vice Chair to trustees, the PPM kind of spells out a process. We've already made the draft changes. It's quite simple wording, and our current policies are actually fairly aligned already, but we did take that wording around cell phones and put it in. We're going to share that at Family of Schools with our administrators. The PPM also suggests taking it to PIC, SEAC, and the Indigenous Advisory Council. So we've got those dates set up before the November 4th date as well, just to get feedback and share. We've also added some new pieces around to the Code of Conduct as well. So we'll get feedback on all of those. Some of the other ones are just the cannabis changes of a year ago, the vaping policies we've brought in around banning paraphernalia, and we'll do the cell phone pieces as well. We also built in some enhanced parent and harassment wording as well. So we're going to take all of it as a bundle to all of those groups.
So I understand those are going to come to the board at some point, right? To the table? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Okay, Trustee Gray.
Thank you very much. And with the indulgence of Kelly, Trustee Amos, who is the rep on HLF, I'm just going to give a little bit of a plug for the HLF Benefit Bash, which is for everyone's calendar, the 7th of November. Please consider attending that this year. And also, I had reason to correspond with Leslie Mansfield today regarding a few things, and I was interested to see that this time last year 82 students were helped by the HLF. That's in the first couple of weeks of the school year. That was last year, though. That was 82 students. This year it's 151, an 84% increase. And so the need continues to grow, and again giving us ever the more reason to do what we can to support the Halton Learning Foundation. And again, that benefit bash that's coming up is the 7th of November. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And just a note that in the back of your mind, just about the boundary reviews that came forward. Should any of them go forward, we will need representation on various boundary review committees, so please keep that in mind, and I'll be sending out information, not immediately, but pretty soon. So first they have to kind of go forward. Okay, thanks. I don't see any other trustee questions or comments. So we have exhausted our agenda, and I declare this meeting adjourned. No, actually, we're going back into private, aren't we? Yeah. So I need a motion to go into private. Darn.
Nice try.
Okay, Trustee Garrett's, seconded by Trustee Rocha. Okay.
It's only,
all those in favor of
Tracy,
convening into private?
And your own private conversation.
Triple P.
So you're going to do DPR first, and then I stay?
Go ahead and vote.
Yeah, we should do that, right? That makes more sense.
I got a bit of work to do. Either way, but it makes more sense to do it that way.
Okay.
They can all go.
That carries unanimously. Thank you.
You guys can all go.